What's up, everyone? I hope you all had a wonderful weekend and you are super excited at all of the wonderful, beautiful things that are coming up on this Monday. And this week, I hope you're gearing up for a wonderful week, in fact, the best week of your life. And I'm glad you'll be back here on this podcast where we're going to be talking about challenging yourself and why it is important to learn how to challenge yourself. And I'm going to share with you the first time I can remember challenging myself in a serious way. I don't think I've ever shared this on the podcast or anywhere else publicly, and I'm excited to do so today. So welcome back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. Of course, I'm Elliott Connie, and I am your host. So I want to tell you the first time I can remember challenging myself. Growing up, I was a baseball player. I've talked about that lots and lots of times, but I want to tell you how I made the All-Star team the very first year that I did that. I went on to make many, many All-Star teams in my childhood, but this is the very first time I made the All-Star team. There was a team in Franklin, Massachusetts, kind of the rec league, called Rotary Club. And Rotary Club was historically known for being terrible. There was a team that was great. My brother was on that team. My younger brother, it was called Knights of Columbus. And then there was a Rotary Club, which was known for being terrible. And when I was 11 years old, they drafted me onto their team. And I was one of the better players on the team. At the end of the season, they select an all-star team, which is a huge deal because that means you get to travel all throughout New England and play other teams. So you want to make the all-star team because the competition is higher, but also you get to have more fun. You get to play in tournaments and you get to travel. Like, you're not just playing against teams in Franklin, Massachusetts, but you're traveling all throughout New England. And I did not make the all-star team when I was 11, in spite of being one of the better players on the team and one of the better players around. And it bugged me. Like, I didn't feel shorted or anything. I didn't think anything wrong had happened. But I can remember going to the field and watching all of the all-stars playing. And I remember thinking, I am not going to miss this next year. There is no way I'm going to miss this next year. And for the next year, in my little 11 and 12-year-old self, I worked really, really hard to improve my skills just in my backyard, playing catch with my brother, playing catch with my friends. I used to practice hitting off of a tee in my basement. I would hit off of a tee into this rug that I had hung. I was literally working to become a better baseball player as an 11 and 12-year-old. And then something crazy happened. And I think this is the number one reason why my work ethic is the way that it is. So the next year, I was the best player in the league. I led the league in batting average, home runs, runs batted in. My team won the town championship, and I was invited to the All-Star tryouts. And I was so excited, and only to learn that I was left off of the team in spite of being the best player in the league and leading my team to a championship. One of the coaches in the league came to my house and told me that he believed the reason I was left off the team was because of race issues. Franklin, Massachusetts is a predominantly white area. And it lit a fire in me that burns to this very day. That happened when I was 12 years old. I'm now 45. That was 33 years ago. And I can remember thinking, I am never going to let myself be left off anything. I'm going to make it so abundantly clear with my effort, with my drive, with my work. I'm going to give it everything I got to make sure no one ever can shortchange me again without making it completely obvious that they're doing so on purpose and doing something wrong and unjust. The rest of my childhood, I made every all-star team, and I developed the ability to focus and work and hone in and literally like laser-like focus on whatever goal I'm in pursuit of. And it helped me later in life get a master's degree. It helped me later in life get a psychotherapy license. It helped me later in life write books and become a leader in the field of psychotherapy. It helped me to realize sometimes life is just not fair and you have to outwork injustice. Sometimes you just have to grind and you have to put everything you have into the accomplishments of your goals because there are sometimes unfair forces trying to hold you back. That was the first time I remember learning that lesson as a 13-year-old. And while I think it was unfair and I wish I hadn't had to go through it, the lesson that I carry with me from those times has served me very, very well in life. So I'm not sure if I've ever shared that on the podcast, but I hope it benefits you now. So I want you to think about, when was the first time you remember learning that you have to challenge and push yourself in order to accomplish your goal? Thank you for being here today. Thank you for sharing this podcast. Please keep doing that on your social media or with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And don't forget to subscribe. I really love the way you guys support me. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Simplecast, wherever you listen to your podcast. And please support the podcast on Patreon. There's some bonus episodes and some cool things if you support me on Patreon. Thank you so much, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Facing a challenge to become a better person is hard, oftentimes very hard. And today I'm going to talk about a time where I had to face a challenge and work really hard to become my best version of myself to take on this challenge. And I'm going to tell you how it worked out. Now, this is going to be a really personal episode of this podcast. As I was thinking about recording it, I was actually thinking, am I bold enough to say this? But I think I need to, because I think people need to understand. So I want to welcome you back to the aha moments, where every day I share the lessons I learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. Of course, I'm your host, Elliott Connie, and I'm going to talk to you about maybe the hardest thing that I have ever been through. Certainly one of the hardest things I've ever been through as an adult. And it was an attempt by people within my field. I'm a psychotherapist and I practice something called solution-focused brief therapy. And I had to deal with an attempt from people within my field to blackball me from this field. Now, those of you know, I've talked a lot about facing racial discrimination and those sorts of things, but today I'm going to get really specific. There was an organization known as the Solution-Focused Brief Therapy Association. And for years, the board of this organization would work really, really hard and say really, really awful things to stop my career's progress. You know, to be honest with you, I can't really explain what was going on. At the time, I started doing solution-focused brief therapy 2008, 2009. For whatever reason, this approach just immediately spoke to me, immediately made sense, and I could just do it. I wish I could tell you why or what that was, but what I can tell you is it upset a lot of people that I was able to write about it, and I could get on that stage, man, and I could do my thing. And people started following me, and people started reading my books and reading my material and watching my videos. And these people on this board started accusing me of only wanting money and being all about me and saying really horrible, awful things about me personally that weren't true. And there was one woman in particular, her name was Tharana Nelson, Dr. Tharana Nelson to be specific. She said some really awful things to me. And one day I saw her at a conference and she waved to me. I was walking with a good friend of mine and she waved to me. And I just walked by because I didn't have anything to say to her. She said some really terrible things about me. So she pulled my friend aside and was like, why is Elliott upset? And my friend was like, look, things have been said. And then she said she wanted to have a conversation with me. And I was happy to do that. I'm happy to have a conversation and put bygones behind us and move on. And we ended up having a conversation on the phone, and it was awful. On this phone call, she just justified her racist and horrible behavior. And one of the things she said on this phone call was, the solution-focused brief therapy field will never welcome me. And she said, do you want to know why you'll never be a part of the Solution-Focused Brief Therapy Association? And I said, sure. And she said, because this is a house you're not welcome in. It's exactly what she said. And it was so hurtful and so angry, so anger-inducing, that I thought long and hard about how do I respond to this. And this is where the challenge came. I had to really work to stay disciplined and stay the person that my mother raised me to be and not stoop to that level and not let the anger control me. And you know what? I decided in that moment, I'm just going to work and do the best work that I can and just let the Rana and people like the Rana live with who they are and how they've conducted themselves. And you know what? It worked. These days, I have the largest training organization in this field. These days, I have the biggest following in this field. And that organization that she said was like a house I'm not welcome in, I'm now the vice president of the Solution-Focused Brief Therapy Association. And I'm so proud of the way I faced that challenge. Now, I faced the challenge that is external of the field, but I also faced the challenge that was internal, like me working to stay the best version of myself and do my heart-led work that I've always done that I'm so vested in. And now I share this story with you not because it's easy, and I mention her by name not because it's easy. I mention her by name because people who do racist, horrible things often live in silence. And I made a commitment to myself that if you're going to behave that way, I'm going to speak of you in name. And if you don't want to be spoken of in name, don't be a horrible person. It's also hard to share because it was literally one of the hardest things I've ever been through. But I tell it to you because of the way it has worked out. I went through all of that and have become the largest voice in this field, and the very organization that worked so hard to ruin my career, and the very person who told me you won't be allowed in this organization, I'm now the vice president of that association, and she has no involvement whatsoever. She has, to a large degree, made it impossible for her to continue to exist in this field in the way that she was just a few years ago. So please face your challenges. Face your internal challenges that kind of make it hard for you to be the person you want to be. Face your external challenges that get in the way. Face those internal challenges, but be the person who you want to be most. And I promise things have a more significant way of working out for you. And that's honestly the thing I credit with that made me achieve the things that I've ultimately gone on to achieve. So I want to encourage you, Rick, remember who you are. Remember who you were raised to be. Remember who you are at your best, because that's who the world needs more of. And just stick to being that person. So thank you for being here today and listening to this. It was really meaningful to me. Please continue to share this podcast on your social media platforms or with at least one person in your personal life that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And also, don't forget to subscribe. You can do that at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Simplecast. And please, please, please support this podcast on Patreon, where you can get some added bonuses and extra episodes of this podcast. And those of you who like to start your day with the aha moments, you can start your weekend days with the aha moments, because one of the bonuses is you get to listen to more episodes through the weekend. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you. Today I'm going to tell you the hard truth about challenging yourself and facing challenges. And it's the truth that I don't think people talk enough about. It's the truth that I don't think we are as honest and transparent about as we should be. But here it is. When you're working to face a challenge, when you are challenging yourself, you are going to want to quit. Because that's the thing about challenges, is they're hard. And at some point, you're going to want to quit. And in today's episode, I'm going to tell you exactly what I do to make sure I don't give up. Welcome back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. Of course, I'm your host, Elliott Connie. I'm super excited to get into this today. So here's the thing about me. I refuse to negotiate with myself. When I set out on a journey to accomplish something, the deal is made. It's done. I'm not giving up. This is what I'm doing. So when I set out to get a degree, write a book, accomplish certain professional goals, accomplish certain personal goals, I am not negotiating with myself. The deal was made when I decided to do it. And there's only two options. I'm either going to achieve what I set out to achieve, or I'm going to die moving in the direction of that thing. And that's what I remind myself of when it is hard. You know, when the alarm clock goes off at 4 a.m. because I got to do some writing before I start seeing clients. I don't want to get out of bed. It's warm, it's cozy, it's comfortable. But I cannot tolerate the taste of failure or quitting. Like, I can't handle it. I just can't handle it. So I have to tell myself, like, you made this deal. And I made it because there's an outcome that I'm hoping to achieve. So I don't negotiate with myself. The deal has been made and I am going to see it through. And the reason I made the deal is because there is something on the other side of achieving that is so desirable that I'm willing to do anything to get there. Absolutely anything. Like, I can remember the first time, I'll never forget getting my first book deal. This was all the way back in 2008. First book came out in 2009, but I got the deal in 2008. And I couldn't believe that someone gave me a book deal. But now my job was to write the book. And I sat down, man, and I worked with my co-editor and just plowed away at my task related to that book. And I will never forget receiving that book in the mail. I will never forget the feeling of seeing a book with my name on it. It didn't make me wealthy. Like, I didn't get a huge book advance for that first one. I didn't get any kind of riches from it or anything, but I just never lived a life where I thought I would be someone who had a book with their name on the cover of it. I walked around with that book in my possession. Like, I took it everywhere I went, in my backpack, in my car, to my appointment. Like, I literally walked around with that book everywhere I went for weeks, months. I mean, I was just so blown away. And I remember that feeling, man. And when I'm setting out on a goal, regardless what the goal is, I think about that feeling. I think about what it's like to stand on the summit of the mountain of your accomplishment and look around and think, look what you just did. That's how I push myself. That's how I challenge myself. So even when the challenge seems daunting, I am not going to negotiate with myself. The deal has been made, and I am committed to experiencing that feeling that you have that only happens when you stand on the summit of your journey. And I will never forget summiting with that book and holding that book in my hand, looking at it and saying, holy cow, it says Elliott Connie on the cover right there. I was an author. I set another goal. At that time, I wasn't willing to call myself an author because I'd only done it once. To me, the word author is like a label, and I have to do it again in order to achieve that. In order to be a book writer, I have to be someone who writes books instead of someone who's just written one. And now I was on fire to summit that mountain. And then I wanted to be someone that was making a contribution to the field. So that meant lectures. That meant figuring out how to reach people online. All those things. And I'm going to summit all those things because when I have a challenge for myself, I am not negotiating with me. That's the deal. I made the deal and I'm going to see it through. That's what I think about when I'm challenging myself. And I want to invite you to think about what is it that you think about when you challenge yourself. Thank you for being here today. I really, really appreciate it. I love you guys. It means so much to me. So please keep following me. Keep sharing this on your social media platforms with at least one person you think could benefit from hearing this message. And don't forget to subscribe. You can do that wherever it is you love listening to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Simplecast. And please support me on Patreon. There's some really cool bonuses for the people who support me on Patreon. And I really appreciate it. So can't wait to see you tomorrow. So as I am making the recording for this podcast, the NBA Finals, the National Basketball Association Finals have been going on. And there's a player on the team that I think exemplifies, on one of the teams that I think exemplifies challenging yourself and overcoming obstacles and really, really getting the most out of yourself. And in today's podcast, we're going to talk about who that is and the lessons we can learn from this person. So welcome back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. And the player that I want to talk to you about is a guy by the name of Stephen Curry. So Stephen Curry is one of the greatest basketball players that has ever lived. And most people would accuse him or would say about him, he's the greatest shooter that has ever lived. And he's playing in a contest against a team called the Boston Celtics, and they're playing in this series. And it has been very, very hard for Stephen Curry. But you watch him work so incredibly hard to get open and to take the kind of shots that put him in a position to win. But during this series, they lost a really important game. They lost a game where it really looked like the Golden State Warriors, which is the team he plays for, were not going to do well. In fact, most professional basketball analysts believed that the Boston Celtics were going to beat the Golden State Warriors. Now, true story, I put on my Twitter after the Golden State Warriors lost the first game to the Boston Celtics that I predicted Golden State would win in 6, which might actually happen tonight or tomorrow, whenever Game 6 is. But most people were saying that the Golden State Warriors were going to lose. And in a really important game, with everything on the line, the Golden State Warriors were behind in this series 2-1. And those of you who aren't huge sports fans, the first team to 4 wins will win the series and win the championship. So the Golden State Warriors are down 2-1. And if they lose this next game, they go down 3-1. And that's really bad news. And Stephen Curry had one of the best games of his entire career playing against the Boston Celtics with everything on the line. And with the Boston Celtics doing everything they possibly could to stop him and he became unstoppable. And, sports is oftentimes a good place to find inspiration because it can be a metaphor for life. As I was watching this game and I was watching Steph Curry's performance, I started thinking, what would happen if you gave everything you had to the pursuit of your goal? What would happen if you gave everything you had to pursuing that promotion, pursuing that new job, pursuing that better relationship with your children or spouse, that business opportunity? Like, what would happen if you literally laid it all on the line and left no room for error? You just literally went all in. See, the truth is, whenever we challenge ourselves to achieve something, most of us don't go all in. We leave a little wiggle room so that if it doesn't fail, we have a nice built-in excuse. Well, I didn't really want it anyway, or, I would have been able to do that except my life got too busy. But what if you just said, forget all excuses? What if you just said, I'm just going to give it everything I have? One of the things that you could, even if you're not a super huge sports fan, when you watch that game, which was game 4 of this series, it would have been very obvious to you that Stephen Curry was giving it everything he had. Every ounce of energy and effort he was pouring into winning this game. And it was awe-inspiring. Like, it was just beautiful to watch. And it begs the question, what would happen if we made it our habit and routine to give the endeavors we're pursuing every single thing we've got? That's the lesson I want you guys to take into your daily lives. It doesn't have to just be something that professional athletes do when they're playing for championships. It can be something that we do in our daily lives. And I think that's exactly what we should be in pursuit of. So I want to encourage you to pursue greatness, to challenge yourself to the point of uncomfortability so that you are giving everything you have to an endeavor, and watch how amazing life can get. So thank you for being here today. Please continue to share this podcast on your social media platforms and with people in your personal life. And thank you so, so much for that. It means the world to me. And also, please subscribe wherever it is you listen to podcasts, whether that's Apple, Google Podcast, Spotify, Simplecast, wherever it is. And please continue to support me on Patreon, where we have more bonuses and benefits for being a Patreon subscriber. I look forward to seeing you in tomorrow's episode. Growing up in Massachusetts, there was this very odd phrase that people would use when you were asking for directions to get to a place. I had never heard this phrase any other place other than Massachusetts, but it really relates to what we've been talking about this week in terms of challenging yourself. And I'm going to tell you what that phrase is and how it relates to challenging yourself in today's episode. So welcome back to Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. So let me tell you what used to happen in Massachusetts when I was growing up is someone would ask for directions. Like, you'd ask somebody for direction. You would say, how do you get to the train station? And they would say, you can't get there from here. You have to go to this other place and then you can get there from there. And as a child, I would hear that and I would think, but isn't that getting there from here? Because the truth is, you can get to anywhere from anywhere. And I think sometimes we get discouraged in our life because, maybe the beginning of your life didn't go the way that other people's lives went, or maybe the beginning of your life wasn't as easy as other people's lives was, or even as yours should have been. Or maybe you were starting from the bottom. But I want you to always remember that anyone can get to anywhere from anywhere. It doesn't matter where your origin started. It doesn't matter what hurdles you had in the early part of your life or career. It doesn't matter if you're starting on the bottom rung of the ladder. You can climb that ladder and get anywhere if you are willing to challenge yourself and work hard. The rewards are for the people who push themselves. The rewards are for the people who are willing to be uncomfortable. The rewards are for the people who are willing to fail and fail and fail until they do not fail anymore. I had a client once and he said he failed at everything. This client was really dejected and really low and had been through some really hard times. And he said, I fail at everything. And I asked him what sounded like an odd question, but it ended up being a question that literally changed his life. And I said to him, so let's imagine tomorrow is the day that you fail at failing. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, if you fail at everything, then doesn't that mean eventually you're going to fail at being a failure and accidentally succeed at something? And he looked at me and he thought, holy cow, I think that's true. I saw that client 2 weeks later and his entire life had changed. And I asked him what was different. And he said, every single day I woke up, I said, this is the day I fail at failing. And it allowed him to succeed. And I share that story with you because I want you guys to know that anyone can become anything from anywhere. Anyone can get to anywhere from anywhere. You can become whatever it is you want to become if you are willing to work hard. So please put in the effort, put in the time, put in the drive. Take time to dream and dream big. Imagine what that thing is that you want to become and then go after it. That's the message I want to leave you with this week. And I hope you enjoyed our talk about challenging yourself. So thank you for being here. Thanks for sharing this podcast. Thanks for listening. Please continue to share this podcast on your social media platforms. And don't forget to subscribe. You can do that wherever you listen to podcasts, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Simplecast, wherever it is you take in podcasts. And don't forget, there are bonus episodes and PDF downloads if you support this podcast on Patreon. And I look forward to seeing you on Monday.